Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating, but also, I think, a very challenging set of ideas from C.S. Lewis.
Definitely challenging.
We've gathered some of his core arguments about right and wrong, and they really force you to stop and re-examine some pretty basic assumptions, things we take for granted about goodness, and even what it means to progress.
And that's where he really gets you. Lewis uses this, this relentless logic to push you towards a conclusion that a lot of people just find deeply uncomfortable.
Which is
the idea that this universal moral standard we all seem to have, well, its existence implies that, in his words, somebody or something from beyond the material universe is somehow interacting with us.
And that's the tension right there.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you hear that, especially coming from Lewis, your guard goes up. You start to wonder, is this a genuine philosophical argument, or is it just a kind of religious argument in disguise?
A religious jaw,
Yeah.
as he puts it. Exactly. He knew that would be the immediate reaction. He anticipated that people would just want to dismiss it all and say, look, you can't put the clock back.
That the world has moved on.
Yes. We've tried religion. That's old news.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack Lewis's brilliant answer to that objection. We need to understand why he argues that facing this moral reality isn't the end of a religious argument.
But the absolute necessary starting point for any real conversation about goodness.
And we need to figure out why that clock analogy just doesn't work for him.
And that's right where he begins. He tackles that idea head on. This notion that going back to moral first principles is somehow anti-progressive.
I mean, on the surface, it sounds like it is, doesn't it? Progress means forward, always.
But we just assume that. We moved away from something it must have been for a good reason. An improvement.
But Lewis just flips that whole idea on its head.
Completely. He says, look, if the clock is telling the wrong time, putting it back isn't backwards. It's a very sensible thing to do. Progress isn't just moving. It's getting nearer to where you actually want to be.
Which is where he brings in that fantastic analogy of the wrong road.
Oh, it's so simple and effective.
Walk us through it.
He just says, imagine you've taken a wrong turn on a long car journey. Going forward even faster doesn't help. It just gets you more lost more quickly.
So stepping on the gas is just accelerating your mistake.
Yes. In that situation, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. The person who turns back the soonest. Lewis says that's the most progressive man.
Because he's the one who's going to get to the destination first.
Exactly. It completely reframes progress as a kind of intellectual humility, not just stubborn forward motion.
He does it again with arithmetic, too.
Yeah, the math sum. If you make a mistake on the first line of a long calculation, the quickest way to get the right answer is to admit it, erase everything, and start over.
There's nothing progressive about being, as he says, pig-headed.
Right. So when Lewis looks at the state of the world, he concludes that on some fundamental level, humanity has made a big mistake. We're on the wrong road.
Therefore, going back is the quickest way on.
And that forces you to just, pause your feelings about religion and just focus on the facts of the situation. Are we on the right path or not?
Okay, so once we accept that we might be lost, we have to start looking for a map.
And this is where Lewis is very careful. He says, look, we're still not doing a religious jaw. We're not opening the Bible. We're using our own steam, just logic and observation, to find out about this. This some body or something behind the moral law.
And this is where the first real shock comes in.
A big one. Because we find two completely different, almost contradictory pieces of evidence about whatever this power is.
So evidence number one is the universe itself, the physical world.
Right. And if that's all you had to go on, you'd have to conclude two things. First, that the creator is a great artist.
Because the universe is beautiful, intricate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you'd also have to conclude that this artist is quite merciless and no friend to man.
Because the universe is also dangerous and terrifying. It's indifferent.
Totally indifferent. You see disease, disasters, violence. The laws of physics, the law of nature as he calls it, functions without any compassion at all. It's scary.
But then we get the second piece of evidence, the one he says is better.
Much better. The moral law. He calls it inside information.
Why inside information?
His analogy is you learn more about a man by listening to his conversation than by just looking at a house he built. The universe is the house. The moral law. That's the conversation.
And this is a really key distinction he makes, isn't it? The difference between the law of nature, like gravity, and what he calls the law of human nature.
It's the whole foundation. The law of nature just is. A rock doesn't decide whether or not to obey gravity. It just falls. But the law of human nature, the moral law, is the law we know we ought to obey, but we,
We break it all the time.
all the time. But the very fact that we argue about it, that we make excuses for breaking it, that we appeal to a standard of fairness, that proves we all recognize the standard exists.
It's like arguing over a foul in a football game. The argument itself proves that both sides agree there's a rule book.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly. And so what does this internal rule book tell us about the power behind it all?
It tells us it cares about certain things.
Yes, it's intensely interested in right conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Things like fair play, unselfishness, honesty, courage.
So in that very specific sense, we can finally say this power is good.
We can. But this is the pivot. Lewis slams on the brakes here and warns us not to get ahead of ourselves. We can't just assume this goodness is, soft or sentimental.
Indulgent.
Yes, indulgent or sympathetic. Because the evidence of the moral law itself points in the complete opposite direction.
How so?
Well, the moral law itself is as hard as nails. It's rigid. It demands the right thing, the straight thing, no matter how painful or dangerous or difficult it is.
So if God is like the moral law,
Then he is not soft. He demands perfection.
and this slams us right up against what Lewis calls the impersonal barrier.
Right. We've reasoned our way to a power that's more like a mind than a thing, but it could just be a pure impersonal mind, not a person you can have a relationship with.
Or a person who can forgive.
And that's the terrifying part, because you can't ask an impersonal mind to make allowances for you or to let you off.
That's like asking the multiplication table for mercy.
His analogy again, it's perfect.
Yeah.
If you get a math problem wrong, you can't ask the rules of math to feel sorry for you and give you a pass. 2 + 2 is always 4. The standard is absolute.
And this leads us to what he calls the terrible fix, the dilemma.
The corner we've backed ourselves into. Lewis lays out 2 paths, and they both lead to hopelessness.
What's the first one?
Path 1. If the universe is not governed by an absolute goodness, if it's all just random and meaningless, then all our efforts, our hopes for justice, they're all pointless in the end, so that's hopeless.
Okay, but the alternative is somehow worse.
Much worse. Path 2. If the universe is governed by an absolute goodness, by that standard that's as hard as nails, then we are in deep trouble. Because we break that law every single day. We make ourselves enemies to the one thing that gives the universe meaning.
So our case is hopeless again.
Hopeless again. We're damned if it doesn't exist, and we're damned if it does, because we can't live up to it.
So the power we need most is also the thing we should fear the most.
That's the paradox. It is the only comfort, he says, but it's also the supreme terror. We need it desperately, but we also desperately want to hide from it, because we know we've fallen short.
That's a profoundly bleak place to end up using just pure logic.
It is. And that's why he says this whole roundabout way of getting there wasn't a trick. It's absolutely necessary.
Why? Why is the dismay necessary?
Because, Lewis says, Christianity simply does not make sense until you've been there, until you've felt that fix.
You can't just jump to the good news.
You can't. The offer of forgiveness and repentance means nothing to someone who doesn't think they need forgiving or who doesn't feel they've done anything to repent of.
It's like offering medicine to someone who doesn't think they're sick.
Precisely. The offer seems strange, maybe even a little insulting. Lewis says Christianity only begins to talk after you've really faced 3 hard facts.
Okay, what are they?
1, there's a real moral law and a real power behind it. 2, you have broken that law. And 3, because of that, you have put yourself wrong with that power.
So until you realize that you're trapped by this absolute standard with no way out.
Yes. Only when you see your position as nearly desperate, he says, only then will you start to understand what the Christians are talking about. Only when you know you're sick will you listen to the doctor.
And that's where he finally sets up what Christianity claims to offer.
Exactly. It claims to have the explanations. An explanation for how we got into this mess-hating goodness because it judges us, but also loving it because we know it's true.
And an explanation for that contradiction in God himself.
Yes. How he can be both the impersonal, rigid mind behind the law and also a person who can forgive. How the demands of the multiplication table, which we can't meet,
have been met on our behalf.
it's a solution to a problem you first had to realize you had.
So in the end, Lewis is not denying that religion can be a comfort.
Not at all. He says in the long run, it's a thing of unspeakable comfort. But, and this is the key, it does not begin in comfort. It begins in that dismay. It begins in the terrible fix.
And you can't get the comfort by looking for it directly?
Never. That's maybe the biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
If you look for truth, no matter how hard it is, you might find comfort in the end. But if you just look for comfort, all you'll get is soft soap and wishful thinking. And in the end, despair.
You have to face the hard facts first.
You do.
Lewis wrote that people in his time had to get over their wishful thinking about politics before the war. He said it was time they did the same thing with religion. So maybe a final thought for you to take away from this is, what kind of wishful thinking are you holding on to today? What terrifying but maybe necessary fact are you avoiding?
Something to mull over.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the very challenging ideas of C.S. Lewis. We hope it gives you a new way to think about what true progress might actually require.